Morning.
Good morning, David.
So, Ron, everything's just recently changed, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I was feeling a bit below par in the autumn of last year, 2023. Lost a bit of energy, loss of appetite, but it didn't actually prevent me from doing the things I normally do. But I went to the doctors, had a blood test, and was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which came as a bit of a shock since I just don't fit the profile. The nurse at the surgery was very helpful and said, we better try and find out what's caused this. So sent me for a CT scan, which I had on the 1st of December. Then on Christmas Day, having been told by lots of people on Christmas Eve rather, having been told by lots of people in church that I looked very yellow, I ended up in A&E at the William Harvey and was there in all for 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I was told on Christmas Day, 2023, that I had cancer of the pancreas. So after loads more scans and tests and that time in hospital, I came home. The cancer is inoperable. I'm having palliative chemo. That's aimed at shrinking the tumour and giving me a bit more time here on earth. And I'm in touch with the palliative care staff at the Pilgrims Hospice in Ashford, and what a wonderful place that is.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, how did you, and indeed how do you manage to cope with all this?
That's a really good question. I think two big things stand out. One is I am on a very steep learning curve. The other thing is I've had huge support from Joan, my wife, from family, neighbours, friends, church friends, and of course I have to say the medical staff at William Harvey were excellent. So, but have I processed it all? I doubt it. There's still quite a bit to go.
Let's start with this extraordinary kind of taking away of stuff. A lot of changes in a very short time. So, tell us about that.
Well, as you know, David, and most of us know, as we get older, things get a bit more difficult. We perhaps can't run as fast as we used to, or we can't remember as well as we used to. Obviously, you know what I mean. But I was stripped of all the things that I did, playing badminton 3 times a week, preaching and leading services, going into schools with open the book for assemblies. I haven't driven my car since I drove it to A&E on Christmas Eve. And I'm, ask myself, where is God in all this? Who I am has not really changed. I'm still Ron Herbert. I'm still a husband, still a father, still a granddad, still a Christian after 50 years. And I still want to serve God in everything I do.
Which is pretty much why we're doing this, isn't it? It's a kind of like an exploration. But let's get back to that point again about where is God in all this. I mean, everything you did, everything which in a sense was the way you understood Ron, right? It just went, right?
Yep.
Like nobody asked your permission. It just went.
Yes.
Right? Yet, and here's the kicker question. You still believe that God loves you, and you still believe that you can serve him. What do you say?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Many Christians think, over the years I've discovered this, many Christians think that because we are loved by God, we should somehow be immune to the problems and illnesses of the world around us. Deborah Lewis, our children and families worker at church, used a wonderful phrase in a sermon recently. She talked about Christian entitlement. Yeah. Because we're Christians, we're entitled to get the job we want, be blessed all the time, avoid illness. You must have met loads of people who think that, David, as I have. Are people who said things like, when I didn't get that job I really wanted, I almost lost my faith. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it, if our faith in God meant that we never suffered a serious illness or a broken relationship, but it does not mean that.
No.
Yes, I believe absolutely that God is sovereign,
Yeah.
but he's not like a puppeteer controlling our strings.
So I've got another nasty question, Ron. If God is ultimately in control and you believe he loves you, why do you think he isn't controlling your cancer? I mean, is he trying to teach you a lesson? I mean, is he punishing you for sin? Because, I mean, talk about people thinking that they're entitled. I've met many people who think, you know, I lived a good life. Why is God doing this to me?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you respond to someone like that, Ron?
Well, I want to say God is just not like that.
What? Not a punishing God?
Not a punishing God. He's a loving God.
Right.
What springs to mind when you talk about a punishing God is I went to a very traditional grammar school.
Me too.
Yeah. And the teacher still wore gowns.
Me too.
Yeah. And the head teacher used to stand and frown at us when we came for assembly, and I could almost see him standing there with his cane, daring anyone to look to the side or whisper to a neighbour or put one step out of line.
Yeah.
And some people seem to think that God is a bit like that old-fashioned headmaster.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is, he isn't and never has been like that. He loves us, he loves me, he wants the best for us, he wants the best for me. But we live in a fallen world, right? We all have a tendency to make wrong choices. You know, as I do, David, when you've got kids of your own, you don't have to teach them to tell lies. That comes naturally.
Exactly.
You don't have to teach them to cheat at games. No. That comes naturally too. And that natural tendency to do the wrong thing is what we call sin. It's not just doing a wrong thing, but it has actually tainted the whole of creation.
Is that what you mean by a fallen world then?
Yes.
I got it.
Yeah. So the creation doesn't quite work as God intended it in the first place.
Right.
In fact, and I say this many times, we live on a dung heap and sometimes we are just overwhelmed by the stench.
So that's called sin, right? And because of that fallenness, there's a disease called cancer in the universe, which kills people. And for you, that's kind of like being overwhelmed by the stench.
Yes. But that would also be true, David, of Christians caught up in war. Yeah. In Ukraine or Gaza even, or Sudan at the moment. It will be true of folk caught up in famines and droughts. Yeah. That's the stench. It's not their doing. Yeah. It's not even God's doing. It's just the way the world is.
Yeah. So in the midst of all this stench, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I come back again at you. You still hold on to your lifelong belief that God loves you. And that even this rotten thing called pancreatic cancer is something which can bring, and it seems to have been bringing, good things into your life. And now through these talks, perhaps into the lives of others.
Well, I hope so, David. But I have to say, I was well and truly shaken by my cancer diagnosis. Shed a few tears, obviously. Wondered quite what the future held, made sure that things like my will and everything are up to date. But, and this is the big but, that cancer diagnosis, rather than turning me away from God, has driven me more and more to seek refuge in him.
Can we unpack that thing of refuge? Yep. What does it mean? Are you talking merely about escaping from pain or from cancer? Or is it something different when you talk about refuge in God?
I think it's much more than escaping from pain or the stench of the world. I think the best way to sum it up for me is home. That's where my home is with God. And ever since I became a Christian, I've been on the journey home. And I know that that refuge is home, where I shall be completely safe, completely secure, free from the stench of the world, because I'll be at home with God.
Ron, thank you so much. And I'm sure that we are all looking forward to the next instalment of Ron's reflections.
Yeah, and so am I.